In this video, we're going to learn about using app.map to create branches in a pipeline. So far in our pipeline, we have one direction pipeline. For example, this pipeline consists of 4 different middleware components. The request is routed from middleware number 1 all the way to middleware number 4 and then returns back. So this is one direction. But sometimes we need to create branches from the pipeline. For example, at the place where middleware number 2 is, if certain conditions is matched, then instead of going to middleware number 2, we might need to go to a different branch. For example, if I call this middleware component number 5, and then I call the next one middleware component number 6, then when certain condition is met, the request need to be routed to middleware component number 5. And number 6 is the terminal middleware, and it returns back to number 5, and then it returns back to number 1, and all the way back to Castro server. So you can see that this is a different branch. If you consider this one as a branch, then this is another branch, right? So we have 2 branches. And the feature of this type of branch is that the second branch never rejoin to the main branch, right? Because the request goes from middleware number 1 to number 5 to number 6, and then goes back to number 5, goes back to number 1, and then goes back to the Castro server eventually. It will be forwarded back to the browser, right? It never goes from number 6 to number 2. It doesn't rejoin the main branch here. So this is when we use app.map. In fact, there are 2 methods to do this. In this video, we're going to talk about app.map. So let's jump into Visual Studio, try to create such branch in the pipeline. Okay, so this is the project that we worked with in the past video. And if we were to create a branch at the place where middleware number 2 is, we can create it before middleware number 2. Because if certain condition is met, we don't want the request to be forwarded to the rest of the middleware components. We want to branch out right here. That's why you want to add it before the second middleware here. Well, here we're using run. Because we're using run, so middleware number 3 is never going to be reached. So let's change this back, first of all, to make this an entire complete middleware pipeline from number 1 to number 3. So let's change this, and we're going to add next over here. And let's copy this and paste it over here. And change this to number 2, change this to number 2. So now we have a complete middleware pipeline from middleware number 1, 2 to 3, and then returns back to 2 to 1. Okay, now we want to create a branch from middleware number 2. In other words, we want to skip middleware number 2. So what do? We use app.map. And then this one, you can see that it takes a root pattern here. And the root pattern has different way to be provided. You can basically provide just a string in the very simplest form. Right? So for example, if I go to /employees, then we want to route the request to a complete different branch, and we can create that branch right here. So you can see that this is not a request delegate anymore, right? This is an action whose parameter is application builder. So therefore, we are going to say app builder, and then we are going to create a branch of the pipeline right inside this delegate here, right? So we can say app builder dot, and then you can use the use method to create a middleware component. You can use the run method to create a middleware component. So let's try to use the use method to create a middleware component. And because we're using use, we can just copy and paste. So let me copy this and paste it right here. And of course, we're going to change this to number 5. And this one to number 5 as well. And if we were to create another component inside this new branch, I'm going to just copy and paste this. And we're going to call this number 6. And this is number 6 as well. So now you notice that we created a new branch of the pipeline, which consists of 2 different middleware components. And they will be called one after another because we use the use method to create the middleware component. And this new branch will only be reached when the URL of the HTTP request goes to slash employees, or at least starts with this, then it will be routed to this new pipeline. And the rest of the components in the main pipeline will be skipped. So let's give it a try and see whether that works as I mentioned. Let's run the application. All right, so this is the application. Because I didn't go to employees, because default is the root path, right? The root path uses the main branch. So we're gonna from 1 to 2 to 3 and then returns all the way back. So this is the main branch. What if we go to slash employees? And we can see that we're going to number 1 and then immediately branched to number 5. And then it calls the next middleware component function here, so which is number 6. And then it finishes calling number 6 and goes back to number 5, goes back to number 1. And now we see everything in the browser. So you can see that we completely skipped number 3 and number 4, which are in the main branch. What if I add something, 1111, for example? I hit enter, and you can see that now it goes to the main branch. And what if I do employee slash position, let's say? Now you can see that it uses the new branch of the pipeline instead of the main branch. That's why I'm saying that the map method, it matches any valid path that starts with slash employees, but it doesn't include the cases where you have this type of path. As long as if you finish the path with employees and then add another section or segment like this, or you can add as many as you want. It's going to still map to slash employees, and then you're going to use the new branch. And that's everything I want to cover in this video. If any questions, please let me know. If not, I will see you in the next one.